Imagine waking up one morning and your money has an expiry date. Imagine a government that can freeze your account, not through a court order, not through a bank, but with a single line of code. Imagine a world where every coffee you buy, every donation you make, every book you purchase is logged, tracked, and stored permanently in a government database. This isn't science fiction. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is the architecture being quietly built by governments right now across 134 countries. And it is called the Central Bank Digital Currency, or CBDC. And here's the part they don't tell you in the press release. The country furthest ahead in this race is China, and they have already proven it works. Meanwhile, in the United States, the House of Representatives passed a bill to ban it outright because the people writing the legislation called it a CCP-style surveillance tool. Welcome to the CBDC war. This is a battle over who controls money, and through money, who controls you. Before we get into the power plays, let's establish what a CBDC actually is, because most coverage gets this wrong. A central bank digital currency is not Bitcoin. It is not a cryptocurrency. It is not decentralized. A CBDC is the digital version of a country's national currency, issued and controlled directly by that country's central bank. Think of it as digital cash, except unlike cash, it can be programmed. This word, programmable, is the most important word in this entire story. Let me explain why. With physical cash, once you have it, it's yours. You can spend it wherever you want, whenever you want, on whatever you want. The government has no visibility into what you do with it. A CBDC is fundamentally different. Because it lives on a government-managed digital ledger, the central bank can see every transaction in real time. And because it's programmable, the government can attach conditions to the money itself. What kind of rules? The money could expire if not spent by a certain date. The money could be restricted to certain categories of purchases. The money could be blocked from being sent to certain people or organizations. A government could impose negative interest rates, essentially taxing your savings automatically. In an extreme scenario, authorities could freeze or seize your funds without a bank intermediary, directly, instantly, silently. Now, central banks will tell you that most of these features are theoretical or that safeguards will be put in place, and we'll cover what they say. But the architecture for all of this exists, and it's already being tested. To understand where this is all heading, you need to look at China, because China didn't just propose a digital currency. It built one, deployed it, and scaled it to hundreds of millions of people. China's digital currency is called the e-CNY, or digital yuan. The People's Bank of China began piloting it in 2020 in just 4 cities. By late 2024, it had expanded to 25 or more major cities and regions across the country. By that same point, the total value of transactions processed through the e-CNY had reached approximately 7.3 trillion yuan. That's more than $1 trillion US. This is not a pilot anymore. This is a live, functioning, national-scale digital currency system. But here is what the Chinese government is doing with it that has alarmed researchers, governments, and civil liberties organizations worldwide. First, programmable expiry. In Shenzhen, the government distributed digital yuan vouchers to citizens as economic stimulus. But these vouchers came with a built-in expiration date: spend it or lose it. This is not a coupon. This is government-issued legal tender that vanishes if you don't spend it on their timeline. A senior official at China's State Administration of Foreign Exchange publicly endorsed integrating programmable features, including expiration dates and spending restrictions, into the digital yuan. Second, surveillance. The e-CNY has been integrated into government welfare disbursements in rural areas, public service payments, and targeted subsidies delivered via smart contracts. Researchers at the Lawfare Institute published a detailed analysis in April 2025, concluding that the e-CNY's architecture, specifically its 2-tiered system and programmability, enables smart contracts and enhanced tracking of all financial transactions. And as Industry Week reported, citing consulting firm Oliver Wyman, the digital yuan is not as much about currency as it is about data and control. The government can set an expiration date for the digital yuan or wipe out an account's balances for individuals or companies found not to be in compliance. This is not theoretical. The infrastructure exists. It is deployed. And 134 countries around the world are now studying China's model. China is not alone. As of 2025, 134 countries and currency unions, representing 98% of global GDP, are exploring or developing their own CBDCs. All G20 nations are involved in some form of CBDC work, and 72 countries are already in advanced phases, meaning active pilots, development, or full launch. A 2024 survey found that 94% of central banks are working on CBDCs in some capacity. Nearly half expect to issue one within 5 years. Let's look at the key players. The European Central Bank is developing a digital euro. The ECB's president, Christine Lagarde, confirmed the bank's commitment to the project. Under current timelines, EU legislation in 2026, pilot programs starting mid-2027, and potential launch by 2029. Notably, nearly 70% of European card transactions currently processed through non-European companies, primarily American ones like Visa and MasterCard. The ECB explicitly cites this as motivation. They want monetary sovereignty independent of US-controlled payment rails. India's digital rupee reached a circulation value of 10.16 billion rupees, approximately $122 million, by March 2025, growing 334% from the prior year. Nigeria's Naira, launched in 2021, recorded 10 million active users in 2024, double its 2023 figure. But the rollout came with serious controversy. The Nigerian central bank restricted cash withdrawals to force adoption, leaving millions who didn't have smartphones unable to access their own money. Here is where it gets geopolitically explosive. All founding BRICS members, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and their newer partners, are piloting CBDCs, and they are actively building a multi-CBDC cross-border payment network called mBridge. mBridge connects the central bank digital currencies of China, Hong Kong, Thailand, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia. By November 2025, the platform had processed a cumulative $55.49 billion in transactions, compared to just $22 million when it launched in 2022. The BIS, the Central Bank of Central Banks, declared mBridge successful enough to hand control to the participating central banks in October 2024. Translation: this is no longer a research experiment. It is operational infrastructure. And the explicit goal? To create a payment system that bypasses SWIFT, the US-dominated global financial messaging network. To understand why BRICS nations are moving so aggressively, you need to understand the weapon that the United States has been using for decades: the dollar's status as the world's reserve currency. Roughly 60% of global foreign exchange reserves are held in US dollars as of 2024. That dominance gives the United States extraordinary power, the power to impose financial sanctions that can cripple entire economies without firing a single bullet. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, the US and its allies froze approximately $300 billion in Russian central bank assets and cut Russia off from SWIFT. For every country watching, the message was unmistakable. If you cross America, your money can disappear. That event became the single biggest accelerant in the push for CBDC-based alternatives. Russia reported in 2024 that 90% of its trade within the BRICS bloc was conducted in national currencies, not dollars. China's CIPS, the cross-border interbank payment system, has expanded to 193 direct participants and 1,573 indirect participants as of December 2025, processing over $26 trillion in annual business volume. Now combine CIPS with mBridge and CBDCs, and you have a complete alternative financial architecture. One that can conduct international trade, settle payments in real time, and do it all entirely outside of US oversight. The honest answer is not yet, and perhaps not for decades. Experts across financial institutions say a fully trusted alternative to the US dollar is likely decades away, if achievable at all. The Chinese yuan accounts for less than 5% of global reserves compared to the dollar's 59%. But here's what matters. The infrastructure is being built. Even if de-dollarization is slow, the existence of these systems reduces the U.S.'s ability to use financial sanctions as a weapon. That is a fundamental shift in global power, even if it happens quietly over years. The United States has taken a sharp and decisive turn against CBDCs. On January 23, 2025, President Donald Trump signed an executive order titled Strengthening American Leadership in Digital Financial Technology. The order officially banned the creation and issuance of a central bank digital currency in the United States. Any ongoing federal CBDC initiatives were to be immediately terminated. The executive order defined a CBDC as a form of digital money or monetary value denominated in the national unit of account that is a direct liability of the central bank, and prohibited federal agencies from developing, promoting, or implementing one. This followed the House of Representatives passing the CBDC Anti-Surveillance State Act, introduced by Representative Tom Emmer, by a narrow vote of 219 to 217 in July 2025. The bill prohibits the Federal Reserve from issuing a CBDC directly or indirectly to individuals and bars the Fed from using a CBDC as a monetary policy tool. Emmer's language was explicit. Unelected bureaucrats are never allowed to trade Americans' financial privacy for a CCP-style surveillance tool. In March 2025, Trump went further. He signed an executive order establishing a strategic Bitcoin reserve, treating Bitcoin as a national asset, like gold or oil. The U.S. is effectively betting on a decentralized digital currency model, Bitcoin and regulated stablecoins, rather than a government-controlled CBDC. This is a direct ideological counterpoint to China's model. Regardless of which side wins this war, the CBDC shift is going to fundamentally disrupt multiple industries. Let's break down who is most exposed. This is the industry most at risk, and most people aren't talking about it. The IMF has explicitly warned that CBDCs present a potential threat to the traditional business models of existing financial institutions, particularly in deposits and loans. Here's why. Banks survive by taking your deposits and lending that money out. If citizens start holding their money directly with the central bank via CBDC wallets, deposits leave the commercial banking system. Research from the European Commission's Joint Research Center modeled that, depending on the scenario, up to 20% of bank credit extension capacity could be affected under stress conditions. One simulation showed that retail deposit outflows, ranked as the most immediate risk, could force banks to rely on more expensive wholesale funding, contract lending, and fundamentally change their business models. The Bank Policy Institute, which represents major U.S. banks, published a warning that CBDC adoption could transform the place of the central bank and the government more generally in our society, and could cause major disruptions affecting monetary policy transmission, financial stability, and the exchange rate channel. Western Union moves roughly $95 billion in remittances annually, part of a global industry the World Bank estimates at over $626 billion. Today, international remittances carry average fees of around 6.2% per transaction. A CBDC-based system could theoretically settle those same transfers instantly at near zero cost. Western Union itself ran a CBDC remittance pilot with the Digital Dollar Project in BDO Bank in the Philippines, successfully testing instant settlement with hypothetical digital dollars converting to pesos. This is a double-edged sword. If CBDCs enable cheap cross-border transfers, the value proposition of companies like Western Union and MoneyGram collapses, unless they adapt. Western Union is already pivoting. It announced a USDPT stablecoin strategy for cross-border payments, targeted for 2026. The ECB explicitly said it is building a digital euro, partly because 70% of European card transactions flow through non-European processors, meaning American companies. CBDCs that enable peer-to-peer or merchant payment without a card network could dramatically reduce the role of Visa and MasterCard as intermediaries. Both companies are actively investing in CBDC compatibility infrastructure to stay in the game. For the 1.6 billion unbanked people worldwide, CBDCs represent genuine promise. Mobile-based access to digital money without needing a traditional bank account. Nigeria and the Bahamas have pointed to financial inclusion as a primary driver. The IMF predicts CBDCs could account for up to 15% of global cross-border payments by 2030. But there's a dark side. Nigeria's in-era rollout forced cash restrictions that left citizens without smartphones cut off from their savings. Critics noted the policy served the central bank's data collection agenda more than it served citizens. Let's bring this down from geopolitics to your daily life, because ultimately, this is about you. A 2024 survey of U.S. citizens found 74% oppose CBDCs if the government could control how and when they spend money. 68% oppose if the government abolished cash and replaced it with digital currency. 68% oppose if the government could track every purchase. 65% oppose if CBDCs centralize financial data in ways that attract cyber attacks. 64% oppose if the Federal Reserve could impose automatic taxes on unspent money during recessions. These are not fringe concerns. They reflect a fundamental question about the relationship between citizens and their governments. The CFA Institute, in a detailed analysis, put it plainly. CBDCs could amplify privacy challenges because it is not just the transaction or POS system that creates or holds data. The financial element itself is data. Think about what that means. Not just your credit card records. The money itself becomes a surveillance instrument. For people in the authoritarian states, this is already a reality to fear. For people in democracies, the question is whether the safeguards built into law today will hold as governments change, crises emerge, and emergency powers expand. There are legitimate benefits too. Faster payments, reduced corruption through traceable government disbursements, financial access for the unbanked, cheaper remittances. These are real, but the technology is dual use. The same infrastructure that sends government welfare faster can be used to restrict welfare payments to politically acceptable behavior. The same system that stops tax evasion can be used to enforce compliance with policies you may never have voted for. The architecture doesn't care about intent. It only enforces rules. So where does this end? There are essentially three futures playing out simultaneously. Future 1. China's model spreads. If countries adopt CBDCs modeled on China's e-CNY, programmable, surveilled, state-controlled, the world's financial system becomes the most powerful population monitoring tool ever created. Financial privacy, as we know it, ends. Future 2. The West builds privacy-protected CBDCs. The ECB insists its digital euro will use encrypted codes, ensuring even the ECB cannot identify individual payers. Whether that privacy protection survives the next political cycle or the next crisis is the open question. Future 3. The U.S. model wins. America bets on decentralized money. Bitcoin as a reserve, stablecoins for commerce, no government-issued CBDC. If this model attracts global adoption, it limits surveillance while maintaining financial innovation. The truth is, all three futures are happening simultaneously in different parts of the world, and the outcome will be shaped by decisions made in the next 3 to 5 years. In legislatures, central banks, and international standard-setting bodies that most people have never heard of. The CBDC war is not just about payments. It is about who has the power to define the rules of economic life, and what happens to people who break those rules. That is a question every informed person on this planet should be watching. Stay informed, and watch this space.